All right, so today I wanted to make a video on how much money should you spend on a scope. Um, and I think this is a pretty popular issue for people that are just getting into things and even people that are already into things. And I think the first question is you need to ask yourself, what is it for? If it's for long range shooting versus hunting, I think that you're going to have to spend more on a dedicated long range slash tactical setup as compared to a hunting scope. The other thing that I would mention too is that if it's for hunting, I guess same goes for long range shooting as well. Um, are you just going to be sitting in a blind or a tree stand, or are you going to be, carrying it through the bush, like that kind of thing? Because if you're just going to be sitting in a tree stand or a blind, the scope doesn't necessarily need to be the most durable scope in the world, right? Same goes for long range shooting, right? Are you going to be, hitting it off barricades and stuff like that, or are you literally just going to be shooting off a bench rest or laying or whatever, right? Basically, if I were to sum it up as easy as possible, I would say spend as much as you can possibly afford, right? And I'm not saying you go out and spend more just for the hell of it too. I think if you do have a lot of money, then I don't think that you should go buy a Vortex Razor just for the hell of it, right? Especially if you're brand new. Um, One thing that I would mention too is that you definitely do not want to cheap out if you're going to be getting a bigger caliber. Like if you're getting a Magnum or even like a 30-06, like something like that, you definitely do not want to be cheaping out. I see reviews I do read quite a few reviews on scopes, and I see reviews all the time on some of these cheaper scopes, um, of guys. It's like $150, $200 scope, and the review is, oh, I put 100 rounds through it, and the zero stopped working, or it couldn't adjust anymore. And it's like, yeah, you put it on a 30-06 or a 300 Win Mag. Like, what do you expect, right? And I do think that the quality of scopes is definitely getting a lot better. Like, just getting into things roughly, I don't know, 10 years ago, roughly, the quality of scope just in that time has definitely gotten a lot better, let alone 20 or 30 years. So the quality is definitely getting a lot better. Um, Typically, the rule of thumb that a lot of guys have had, and probably still to this day have, is you want to spend at least as much on the scope as you do on the gun, which personally I don't think is true anymore. I don't know if it ever was. Maybe a long time ago, but I don't think it's true because personally I think it's unnecessary for a lot of people, especially entry level people. So um, if you're looking to just get into things, I think you're gonna have to spend. I think you'd want to spend it at least like 250 to 300 Canadian is probably my minimum. US, you're looking at like $200 minimum for a hunting scope. Like that's just the bare minimum. Something like a Vortex Diamondback is a good example of a decent entry level scope. Um, and the reason why I talk about Vortex a lot, and why I'm a fan of Vortex, I don't even have that many of them, but um, they have a line for everything, right? They got your bare minimum entry level, like a decent entry level, a medium, a high end, and like a premium, or maybe not literally everything, but they have at least 4 or 5 levels for everything, right? And that goes as far as tactical and hunting, right? Tactical, they probably have a few, but hunting, they got you covered if you want to get the bare minimum. They got you covered if you want a literal top of the line. Money is not an object for me scope, right? Um, Going a little bit further, I mean, something like this, honestly, for an entry level shooter, it is pretty much all you need, right? 4 to 12. Um, I would probably prefer a little bit more power personally, but again, that's from someone who, again, you might have to take a 400, 500, 600 yard shot. I know for a lot of people that's plenty, but I think that something like this is very good for a basic entry level hunting scope, right? Vortex, you got that top of the line warranty that basically every other manufacturer is forced to copy at this point. Um, they do have, um, going up a little bit. Again, Diamondback Tactical is kind of their entry level as far as tactical goes. Personally, I would want to spend a little bit more. Something that would be Diamondback Tactical first focal plane. That's another thing that's very important. If you're going to get a scope for a dedicated target shooting scope, you want it to be first focal plane. And what that means is if you have like a MIL or a MOA reticle, you know that the hashes or the dots, whatever it is inside the reticle, they're going to be a MIL or an MOA no matter what power the scope is at. A second focal plane, it's only going to be that actual measurement at a certain power. Now, the problem is that the power might be higher or lower than where you want it to be, right? So that's the benefits of a first focal plane scope. Again, if you're buying a scope just for hunting purposes, unless you're someone that lives in a very open area to where it's a normal thing to take a 500-600 yard shot, I don't think it's necessary. I think you can get away with a second focal plane scope, no problem. Um, Again, getting into some of the higher end stuff, if you're willing to want to spend more, but not a crazy amount. Vortex Venom, that's kind of another one of their entry level tactical scopes. Vortex Viper, that's kind of their mid level hunting scopes. Those are solid scopes. You get into some of the Loopholds or Leopolds, depending on how you pronounce it. The Vortex Viper HS and HST, those are some good. You're getting into some of the higher end stuff there. Um, Another thing that I would mention too is that Cabela's doesn't have them, at least Cabela's.ca. Arkin is a very popular brand in the States that I've heard good things about. Primary Arms is also very good. They do exist in Canada, although apparently Cabela's doesn't have them. The Primary Arms is another good example of a manufacturer that has everything from your basic entry level stuff right up until your real high end stuff. Um, so again, those are some good examples of some brands. Honestly, I would say Vortex and Primary Arms are probably the only ones that have a true entry level model and a true high end model. Vortex would be the best example of it, though. They got the PST that's getting up a little bit even more. Loophole, I guess. Loophole doesn't have a true entry level stuff. Loophole is a good example of one that has starting at the mid levels up into the high end. Um, and again, getting into some of the higher end stuff. Again, Night Force. Again, if you're looking for a real high end scope, Night Force is a good example of that. Uh, Again, Bushnell is another example of a brand that has everything from your entry level right up into the high end. Although I think Vortex is a little bit better quality from my experience and from what I read. But again, I don't think that Bushnell is necessarily bad by any means. They do have a decent warranty as well. But again, if you're looking for real high end stuff, Night Force, some of the higher end Loopholds, some of the higher end vortexes, those are the way to go. But again, you're literally getting to the point to where you're spending an arm and a leg. If money's not an option, Night Force ATACR, again, that's the scope that the U.S. military uses, I believe. I don't know what the Canadian one uses off the top of my head. Again, the new Vortex Razor Gen 3, $4,300. Like that again, that's a crazy amount of money. You also have your other ones as well that are even more expensive, right? Again, this Zeiss one, $5,500. Like that's crazy. And some of the European brands I know as well, they're getting up there as well. But again, like I say, to sum it up, in as broad of terms as I possibly can. Spend as much money as you can reasonably afford. But on the flip side, if money isn't an option for you, don't go just blow $3,000-4,000 on a scope just because you can. Um, Honestly, I would say the best advice is try and spend for most new people, try and at least get something mid level. Although there is nothing wrong with a lot of the entry level scopes. So again, that's just what I want, just my opinion. Again, love to hear other people. So again, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more.